because she was kind of like, I'm sick of being sad and all this stuff, and my divorce is final. And she was Jewish. She was like, I want to have a divorce mitzvah.
Divorce mitzvah.
A divorce mitzvah.
Let's go, pick your feet up, though. Let's go, pick your feet up, though.
811 crew, we are back. We are back with Adele Curin. You know it's your boy Jay Turner and
Ulysses Slugger Glenn.
this brother's having a good time and laughing. That we're
outtakes.
obviously having a great conversation today
Adele!
about some difficult topics. We're talking about how do we break up? How do people play when they break up? Is it dirty? Is it rude? Is it nasty? How can it be favorable? How can we protect our kids? And then what is a decent and good breakup? Now, when we left off, I was just asking our expert, Adele Curin, off the bench today. And again, welcome back, Adele. What?
I'm the
Thank you.
expert. I thought I'm the expert. I know everything.
No. Because this is about what you don't know.
Oh, okay,
You know,
sorry.
we have Adele
Okay,
here.
okay.
Okay. But,
All right, I got
but
it,
you
I got it,
generally
I got it.
knowledgeable. Okay, there we go.
I got it, okay.
But like one thing, Adele, is how is social media playing into this? Like you, in my mind, you can't tell me that cats are not looking at their Facebook, their Instagram stories. They're saying, like right now, I'm looking at pictures of all of my favorite families together on the European vacation. They're like, we
Jack
went to
and
so
Jill.
many European
Oh, yeah,
cities,
there's that Jack and Jill
and our
one. Yeah,
daughter
yeah, we saw that,
did a chocolate cooking class in Belgium. Okay, that could be getting too real if somebody did do that. But like, you know, and you're just thinking, man, they just must be the best family. Like everything is all good. I mean, like, is that real? Like, how do we uncouple and keep it sane in this social media telling us how it should be, Adele?
Well, I think the same thing applies to this area as like any other area of life, right? Like when you look at social media, you're only looking at what people choose to put out there.
Right, they're representatives.
Right. Like if it's my trip to Mexico and everything looks all perfect, or your perfect kids, or I find myself, even though I know better, I find myself like some kind of comparing myself. I'm like, their kids look perfect. Why don't my kids like that?
Right.
So
I thought I was the only one who did that. Okay,
no, everybody.
Okay.
And so it's the same thing with marriage, right? Like you look at what somebody else is choosing to put out there. No one's going to put a picture of their like fight they had last night.
Right.
They're just going to put a picture.
This ass didn't even want to go to dinner with us, and now he's smiling all in the
that's
picture.
why like sometimes, and I haven't done it much. I've done it a few times. Like I put really unflattering photos of myself on there. Or, not
in your opinion,
in my opinion,
Okay.
or like pictures of my kids where they're not smiling, looking at the camera, and I'll do a post about imperfect parenting or whatever, because it's real. But yeah, what we're seeing on there isn't real, for sure.
Speaking of social media, I don't mean to interrupt. Mark Zuckerberg, I need my Facebook account back. Thank you. Go ahead.
Whoa.
I haven't had it. I haven't had it since June. It's gone a whole month and a half.
Wow.
I don't know what's going on.
We won't ask what you did.
No, I didn't do anything.
You
Somebody
had a
hacked me.
conscious uncoupling from Facebook.
Right. I still have Instagram.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't think it impacts whether or not people do this. What I do think is that it maybe enhances those feelings of like inadequacy or failure or whatever it may be even more, because you're comparing yourself to other people.
But that's with everything. I think people, when you talk about social media, so that's everything. People always compare themselves. You know, I'm at work in this cube and you're out, in Maldives. Like, how are we? We're not the same. So, you look at social media. You can look at social media and you can tell the relationship is changing. You can look at people's pages all the time, and you're like, you can start looking from the beginning. You're like, oh, things are going well.
Ulysses is he reads the tea leaves on social media.
What I noticed is that the pictures of the couple together
they start.
usually start.
They start just showing the kids. Let's show what we can agree on.
Or you'll see
the kids are fantastic.
You'll see the kids in between the parents.
Right,
and
that's
you're
true.
Like,
that's true.
It's interesting. It's an interesting thing as you start seeing it. But one thing I will say real quick. I remember when I got emancipated, I had an emancipation party. I didn't call it that, but it was like, hey, I didn't really say what it was. But it was just me on the, I guess flyer or whatever it was. It's like, hey, it's my birthday. Blah, blah, blah. So I remember when people came and were like, oh, wait, you're divorced. I'm like, yep.
That's awesome. So,
I didn't do it like
one of my good friends who I don't think you probably know Ulysses. You might know her, Jason. had a party when she got divorced because she was kind of like, I'm sick of being sad and all this stuff, and my divorce is final. And she was Jewish. She was like, I want to have a divorce mitzvah.
Divorce
A
mitzvah.
divorce
that's
mitzvah.
hot.
Wow.
So I hosted it at my new house. And
Wow.
it was like the other party I had at my house.
Once
It
again, I wasn't invited.
it
Once
was
again, I'm
killer.
left out. It's probably because I'm
yeah.
on Facebook.
And then I had one myself.
Right.
Yeah, but it was fun.
That was at your old house.
That was at my old house.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You had an emancipation party too?
I did have one.
It
And it
was-
was a combo, that and birthday party like yours.
Okay.
Most people thought it was just my birthday party, but yeah.
Okay,
It
so
was both.
let me ask you this. So, since you've learned the uncoupling, is there anything you would do when you were getting divorced differently?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
It's a very good question.
Wow.
Like I'm actually really pleased with how it turned out. I mean, like I said, for most people, it doesn't go down that well, you know. And even my kids will say, like, you know, you guys have the best divorce I've ever heard of, which is saying a lot.
Y'all still Netflix and chilling? I mean, what is that?
No,
Is that what we're talking
but
about? I'm just
no,
asking.
but we.
You're not like, hey, you want to see a movie?
What I
just in
would
case
say
need
is we're
the whole thing back.
very effective co-parents.
Okay,
you know what I
good.
mean? And there's no
Okay.
drama.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
But there are still things I do differently. I didn't know about the conscious uncoupling process, or maybe I rolled my eyes at it or whatever too at the time. But I would have gone through that actual process. I would have hired a coach to take us through it, or at least take me through it.
Okay.
Just because I'm such a huge fan of it, and I think I would have learned things, 5 years earlier than I did about myself. And
Adele, has anybody ever changed their mind that when you were working? Have you ever worked with a couple and then they start to constantly uncouple and say, you know what, I think I want to re-spoon with you or something? Has anybody ever come back
actually
now?
not had that happen.
Wow.
It could happen. It could happen. I've heard it happening with other people. It's never happened with me. There was one guy I worked with who had recently gone through a breakup, and he was super upset about it and wanted to get her back. And I was like, look, this is not why we do this.
Right.
You know, you have
It's
to
about
take that off the
uncoupling.
table.
Right.
But they
Yeah.
actually did end up getting back together, and they got married, which I was really happy to
Right,
see.
you said that but they didn't invite you. That sucks. Who
No,
does
but
that?
that's no.
They used you. They used all your information.
Yeah, that's
Right.
what they're supposed to do.
But
That's
people
what I was
do.
there
People,
for.
I don't know if people invite their plastic surgeon to the
No,
wedding.
no.
You're right. You're like,
No.
that's how I got
That
here. I don't
was
need this
definitely
kid.
not an expectation.
No.
But no, I've not had a couple that was actually
Oh, but-
divorcing decide to get to recouple, is what they call it. Yeah.
Let me ask you. This is a question I kind of had. So there's a certain income bracket you have to be in to do the conscious uncoupling.
I mean,
thing?
you have to have enough income to pay for it because insurance doesn't cover
Yeah,
it.
this ain't
So
insurance.
if I make $17.10 an hour in DC, which is
Probably
really, I couldn't
not.
have. Okay.
Right.
Which is sad to say,
So that means
but
low economic people, y'all.
Right.
I
gonna
know,
have to,
I
you guys gonna
know.
be fighting it out.
Right.
Sorry.
But you could buy
buy
the book.
You can buy the book.
You could buy the
You can buy the
book.
book.
You can go on the website. You can do. I don't know how much the course is on Mind Valley, but apparently it's quite good.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you know what? This is where a lot of times the organizations don't really calculate the total cost of family disruption.
Well,
because
true.
if you,
Yeah.
I mean, definitely, I'm just feeling like almost everything else, an ounce of prevention, if this case, by having these types of conversations, if you could reduce the amount of times people are suing each other, arguing each other, if you can take down the volume of discord in the house
Yeah.
because of this, if you can
100%.
reduce the impact on the kids, I mean, there are a lot of really huge
Oh
tangible
my gosh!
benefits to
I
this
mean,
that pay it out. I think.
huge. Like, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do you work with marriage counselors? I wanted to ask it because it seemed like something it would be a hand in hand.
I know.
Oh.
Yeah,
You know
that's
what?
what-
I
yeah.
haven't so far, but you're the second person to suggest that in
Yeah.
a week, and I think that's like it's
Yeah,
a
'cause if so-
really
To be in the toolkit for the
For
marriage
marriage
counselor.
yeah. No, it's great, and I think that the reason I haven't reached out to those people is that it can seem like we're working sort of at what's the term, cross
Well, you're
purposes
trying to-
or whatever, but no, I think for a marriage counselor sees I've been working with this couple for years. It's not working. They want to get a divorce. Like, why wouldn't she want to?
Yeah, so they should move them on to you, or even
Yeah.
when you're first, before you get married, when you're doing the counseling, then it's kind of good to talk about, this could happen. I don't think people talk about when they get married, in the beginning, like, hey, everyone gets married, they think they're going to be married for 4,000 years. That doesn't happen. And so you should look at it in the beginning, like, well, these are things that you should, look at, when you're first getting married, things, so I think it would be, knowing what I know now, oh God. But what I'm saying is that knowing what I know now, I would definitely want to have had someone like you to discuss, what it's like when you're, getting a divorce. If you get to this point when you first get married, what it looks like getting a divorce, or even when I was getting a divorce, I probably would have, we had a really good divorce, but I think I would have used some of the things you've talked about, just even with dealing with my son, dealing with my ex, so on and so forth. So it's, I think it's a good thing. I'm for it.
And
if you got to make more than $17.10 an hour, but
And even more so, I realize now, you asked if there are things I would have done differently in my divorce. And really the only thing I would have done is maybe go through this conscious uncoupling process. But what I've learned more are the things I would have done differently before the marriage.
Right, that's what I was trying to say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Before the marriage, so the kinds of conversations that we
Yes.
should have had that we never had, because people don't address things, and people assume. I mean, I was young. I was 25. People just, I don't know. I assumed things
Right.
work out
Yeah,
a
you
certain
work it
way,
out.
and people make assumptions. That
Now,
they
don't
shouldn't
say
make.
it anymore, because that is very, like, the questions that you should ask before you get to
yeah.
this. We have to take a break right now. When we come back from that break, I want to really kind of zero in on that. How can we avoid some of these things on the back end if possible? And then another thing I want to kind of pivot to is, how can we use this techniques to talk to our kids? Does this strategy work with our kids, or do your kids like, nah, don't be trying to do that type of Jedi stuff on me? All right, so get ready. Let's talk about how this translates to either before and after with the kids when we get back. A11 crew, stay with us. A11 crew, we are back. And I appreciate having Adele, Curin on the set, off the bench, to inform us on how we need to act better and really act like grown-ups here and not act like children when we uncouple.
I didn't. I was fully adult.
In this last space, though, before we went to break, I'm really curious how this uncoupling piece, we've talked about how it deals when you're in the midst of the battle with trying to, end a relationship with your spouse or your partner. I guess I'm curious as to how can these be applied to our kids? Like, are your kids going to listen to you? Because I think these are very, very effective ways to hopefully teach our kids to have better relationships. And I'm wondering, do you have success with talking to your kids about this stuff the same way you talk adults, or are they looking at you, like
You
you're
mean
crazy?
my kids?
Like your kids? Like,
Oh no,
kids,
they think I'm bananas.
Okay, I was,
Okay.
whew. I was like, wow. Okay.
They tell me I'm a hippie, and they think I'm. No, I do. I think that I think they actually appreciate it, but
Right.
they're not going to tell me that, and they're not going to really engage in direct conversation about it.
Right.
But I think that the best thing we can do for our kids is to just be good role models, right? So if they see us acting like grown-ups, like you said, then that's, that is going to translate in some way. I mean, I hope that my kids, and eventually, that it translates into something.
Right.
I mean, at a minimum, I know that they haven't suffered the way they would have if we'd been nasty.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen kids where the parents were nasty.
Yeah.
And then the kids take sides, and it's when you start seeing the kids take sides, I'm like, you shouldn't even be that involved in your
it's
parents'
horrible.
relationship anyway.
But is there ever a time when it's good to stay together for the kids? I mean, is there any scenario where staying together for the kids works out?
I have pretty strong opinions on that. Not everybody will agree.
Break it down.
But I think that when most people talk about staying for the kids, what that means is I'm staying in a miserable situation for my kids' sake. That's what most people mean when they say that. And I don't think that ever works because if kids are seeing their parents miserable, it impacts them, right? So you're not doing your kids any favors by and what the kids too are picking up on is like, you're staying miserable and you're staying miserable because of me. And what is that showing them? That's showing them they don't have any power to make changes in their life, that they can never leave. What if they're in a job they hate and they think they can never leave it?
That's true.
On the other hand, I do think, I have to say, I haven't really seen it happen. I do think on the other hand, you could use your kids as a motivation to work on your relationship and make it work.
Right.
And if that's your situation,
Very key difference.
I think that would be a wonderful reason to like work on your marriage.
Have you seen or do you think that people who stay in bad relationships who have children, do you think the children come out better or do you think the children are worse off?
So I think it depends on what we're talking about, the alternative being, right? So if the situation is that the parents are staying together and they're miserable, I think the kids are not going to be benefiting from that at all. I think if the parents split up and they're happier, then the kids are going to be happier. So I'm not doing a good job describing this.
No.
The bottom line is if the parents are happier, the kids are going to be better off, whether they're married or divorced.
But I don't.
Is what I'm trying to say.
And I hear that, but as you were saying this, I was literally thinking to myself, that is, in my opinion, doesn't that mean that you have to have some really unselfish kids? Like, for instance, somewhere I feel like there is a kid or some kids somewhere who are like, Mom, Dad, oh my God, you're gonna get a divorce, and then I'm gonna be in the group of kids whose parents are divorced, or gosh, Mom, you're gonna respectfully, like my ex-wife, you're gonna drop your married name, such that now when we go to register, my kid's last name is different from their mom's, which automatically puts the whole on blast. I mean, so I guess I wonder, many times, and for kids also too, what if they like their house in their neighborhood? Like Adele, I personally, I mean, your house really wasn't that nice, but I liked it. Okay, and so if your kids like their house, they like their room, they could be like, damn, can't y'all stay? I mean, I'm not trying to move to your little 2-bedroom apartment. What?
I think it depends on the age of the kids. I think when the kids are probably under 16 or so, because they're still doing family, especially if you're doing family things.
Right, if you got a Winnebago.
Yeah, or like you and I. I think
but you don't miss that.
You missed that. It's a whole nother.
His family had a Winnebago.
But what's interesting, you know what? My parents were married for 31 years. They've never said that, that we stayed together for your brother and I. But so they got divorced when I was... Yeah, but I was 31. I was turning 31 that year. So as an adult, it's odd having divorced parents because I didn't grow up that way. So realizing when I go home for
You're like, what happened?
Yeah, I'm like, whoa. So, my mom stayed in our house that we grew up in, but most times, especially when the kids are younger, you usually have to sell the house and move. Very rarely does one person stay. Unless, my mom was they had the house for, since 79, so they got divorced in 2001. House was almost paid off, so it wasn't a huge thing. But normally, the kids, especially in this area, you have a $800,000 mortgage that you got in this area. It usually takes 2 people to keep it. So then they move. The kids can stay in the same private school, but you're no longer living in this, great community, this house. You're not the kids aren't coming to your house to go swimming and all. I can look at having with my own son, and I think that is one of the reasons I would have stayed married. Like, let me keep his life going, as I've already had lived my life as a teenager, kid. So, I think I would have stayed longer.
I think, the answer really, I think I said this at the beginning, it depends, right?
Okay.
Like,
it always
it depends, right? Like, and I think, of course, you want to keep your kids' lives as stable as possible.
Yeah.
And that's one reason for doing this conscious uncoupling thing, right? Like, but the choice isn't necessarily between staying together in a stable situation and being divorced and having it be unstable. It could be that you split up and the situation is still stable and the parents are happier. I mean, if that's the case, I don't know who's to say what's better. And I don't know,
Right.
like, even if the kids initially would prefer their parents together, do you really know that in the long run they're not going to be better off when their parents are both living happier, healthier lives? It's hard to say.
I know that, they say, it's just like, I'll say this, it takes two people to have a kid. So it would basically take two people to raise a child. So when you're divorced, you're no longer, both parents aren't spending that 50-50 time. The kid lives with one parent and then they're on the weekends with the other parent or some split like that. So, you look at studies that kids that come from married families tend to do better versus kids who come from broken homes. So, but then again, you can look, I know some people came from broken homes who are geniuses who have gone off vice president.
Well, also keep in
parents are
mind
divorced,
that
so.
your typical divorce isn't done consciously and kindly.
Not at all.
So, and that's one reason to do this kind of thing early on, so the kids
I do
well.
I do think
Because
you should
the fact
do
of
it
the matter
earlier.
is, you can't, like, I would never just say, hey, you're not that happy, get divorced. But the fact of
Right.
the matter is 50% of people more or less do get divorced. So if that's going to happen, let's make it
Earlier.
let's do it the best way we can.
That's a good point, Adele. And as I was thinking about this, and when you were talking about your family, I was thinking about, I was 8 years old when my parents got divorced, and I was really thinking about that experience. And what I remember about my parents' divorce was not much, but what I do remember afterwards was what I remember was that my mom every weekend would make sure that I called my father. And that is what I remember most, is my mother being the catalyst for an enduring relationship between my father and me, because she could have had the attitude of, that man, you calling him, whatever, I don't know what you... And that, I can see now in retrospect, would have had a very different effect on me.
Totally different.
The fact that she said... Every Saturday morning, she would say, "Did you call your father? Call your father." She helped make my father a priority in my life. Without him, and I really, Mom, I could give you a real. I've told you about that.
Yeah.
It was a good shout out. That was clutch that you did that. But can I just shameless plug out, shout out to my mom and my dad for accepting my collect calls every Saturday. I appreciate that too. But
Where'd you call collect?
I mean, there is that. Okay, she called collect.
Like, charge.
Right, she was like, I put a collect call through, and right, and my dad would always be like, I accept. Anyway.
There's no phone. No
That's
phone.
cute.
Right. It wasn't the bill that long. That was long distance back then. That was DC to Miami. That
One
was
thing
long.
I'll say
That was a
is
25-hour
that
call.
Right.
you were saying earlier, Ulysses, that often or that parents don't have that 50-50 anymore.
Yeah.
So from my experience, and this, I don't think, maybe this is a little unusual, but not that rare, is that in my case, my former husband saw my kids a lot more after our divorce.
Okay.
Because we did have 50-50 custody,
Right, we
and
had
prior to
50-50
that,
too.
I'd been a
Yeah.
stay-at-home mom, and he'd been like a total
okay.
workaholic type, and he got 50% custody, and
All of a sudden, he was on deck.
he was totally stepped up to the plate
Yeah.
as a dad.
That's a good-
And
okay.
he, as a result, became much closer to the kids. So it doesn't always have to be. It's no longer the case where, like, the dad has, like, every
Right.
other weekend and only
Right,
takes
right.
them to Disneyland
Exactly.
and baseball
Right.
games. Like,
No.
it's not,
Doesn't
that
know the
doesn't
kids
happen at
like,
all.
what's their name
Yeah.
again?
Right,
Yeah.
even if it wasn't 50-50 during the marriage, in divorce,
It could
completely
be.
50.
Okay.
And
And in fact, I was told by my attorney, and I'm not, I don't practice law, so I don't claim to know how that works in every state. But my attorney told me at the time, if he wants 50% custody, he'll get it, because
Yeah.
nowadays that's how it goes. So don't
that's
bother
good.
fighting.
That-
Yeah, it is a
I'm
good thing.
happy
I think
that's
that was
that
a
way, too.
conversation we
We
had.
had that
yeah.
before.
It's a good thing.
I said you automatically. So when guys say, "Oh, they took the kids," no, you didn't ask. You just
Right.
didn't
No.
want anything.
Right, because I said I
was
started
like,
with
they start
50-50
with
is what
50,
the conversation got to start
Yeah.
with.
But I do want to say one thing is that if you are, I don't think people should stay in a marriage if it's abusive or
Right.
mentally abusive, physically abusive, if they're doing things to their children. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about if you all are living there for the past 10 years. You're living in separate rooms for 10 years or whatever. And it's been going, why break it up now? Let the kids graduate.
You're talking
Keep it
about
moving.
psychological abuse is fine.
I
Physical abuse is no.
I do want to point out, I mean, and you're welcome to that opinion. I do want to point out that's not like neutral when a kid sees their parents not having a relationship. That actually is damaging too, because if you think about your role modeling for your kids, what a relationship looks like. So if they grow up with parents who, oftentimes, if you're living in separate rooms, there's like this undercurrent of like anger, seething, resentment, whatever. That does damage the kids.
Doors closed between mama and daddy.
Yeah, it does, and a kid feels that even if there's not like active fighting, they know it.
Right.
They know
exactly.
it. That's not great either.
Versus living with a single parent who's kicking it every weekend with different women or woman or
but
woman
you're
or man.
making an assumption there too.
No, I'm just giving
Right.
the difference. A difference. Like, well, okay. Now that they're divorced, now you have the dad who's dating every weekend, and you see a different woman there every.
Oh boy,
that's what I'm saying.
happen?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I'm like, but anyway.
Not that every dad would do that. But can I just take the question up a little bit further? I mean, now we are all divorced, but presumably we will get married again, or we'll be in other relationships again. What should we take forward? Into our future relationships? How might what should we do different when looking at the different attributes for a partner that perhaps we didn't look at before? What do you think?
What would you like before marriage? If we decide before marriage, what advice
what's
would you
the
get?
checklist, Adele? What should we do, girl?
Well,
how do I know if
mean,
this woman right for me?
There's.
You're gonna say it depends, aren't you?
It does depend.
We wanna know.
It does depend. I mean, one thing that is like great about, and I read this phrase somewhere today, like I'm a master. Oh, I'm gonna mess it up, but like I'm very good at making lemonade out of the lemons, right? Like, and that's because I just like to put a positive spin on everything. So, what is a great thing about going through a divorce is that you learn a lot. You learn a lot about what you don't like and doesn't work. So therefore, you learn about what you do want.
That's right.
Yes.
And that's what dating does too, which I frankly didn't do enough of when I was younger. So,
Me either.
so yeah, I mean, I think it's good to like make notes of like the kinds of traits that are important to you. But more important than that, far more important than that, I think is to like, and I kind of hate to say this, but it's like do your own work, like work through your own.
Yeah.
And that's what most of us don't do. And people tend to point the finger and blame the other person for the reason the marriage went down. But instead,
Boom.
yeah, you have to look at
Absolutely.
yourself.
Look at the mirror.
I've done that work.
Yeah, look at the mirror.
Yes.
Yeah, and you have, it's
hard
crucial.
work too.
It's crucial.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're going to end up repeating your mistakes. So that's the most important thing.
Now, with that said, would you get married again? Ooh. 811 crew will be back now.
You know what?
Wow.
That is not my goal. And not because like
Wait a
I'm
minute.
jaded, but it's because
goal is a strong word.
it's not
Right.
my goal. Like for most divorced people, I think we talked about this earlier. Most divorced women I know aren't really interested in getting married again. I don't have the need to, but never say never. Never say never. If it came up and it felt right, I'm sure I'd do it. But it's just it's not my goal.
All right. That's
How about you
interesting.
guys?
Yeah, I would get married again.
Do you is that you actively want to get married again, or is it more just like you would if it?
No, I would actively I actually believe in marriage. I think it's it's something I enjoy. I just was married to the wrong person. So, and actually, when we first were married, it was good. So I did enjoy that. When things were good, they were good. It's just when they were bad, they were just bad. So I'm more conscious and I know what I'm looking for, things I will and will not accept. So the person I was at 28 versus the person I am now at 38 is, wait a minute, what was there laughter? Is different. So, I can clearly see the things I'm looking for then versus things I'm looking for now, and what I thought my marriage was going to even grow into then. So, but I would definitely, would do full pre-marriage counseling, things like that.
Well, the other thing is that like you and I'm just sort of like latched on to when you said I was with the wrong person. which is that like even if you were initially with the right person for you, people change.
Right.
So
the signs, every sign for me was there. I just worked. I did workarounds.
Yeah.
So when you keep doing workarounds, the workarounds get bigger and bigger and bigger. You're like, whoa.
Then you should know.
So yeah.
And even as many workarounds and things I did, I just, to put a capstone on this conversation, I absolutely still believe in marriage. I'm excited about love and a partner and coming into the house again and everything smelling the right way and knowing who I'm traveling with and knowing that my birthday's coming up and knowing that somebody's thinking about my birthday and wanting to be with me. These are things that I absolutely want and am looking forward to. But that's just me. I'm consciously trying to recouple.
I like that.
But that said, we have chopped this up a lot. There's a lot more to talk about in this, but I really want to thank Adele for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. That was really fun.
This was good. You got to be in that right mindset, y'all.
I thought it was the other Adele, but I still like you.
Sorry to disappoint you.
Without music,
No.
811 crew, we are.
There's a fire burning in my heart.